Hey everybody, and welcome back to another video. In today's video, we got the recap for Andor episode 6. Unfortunately, weekends are very busy, so it's Sarah and I once again, um, and Axel from time or two. But we're gonna go over what happened this week. It was very exciting, so hopefully you're able to see the episode for yourself. Sarah is a pessimist when it comes to the show, so. Uh, she has her own opinions, but um, I'm gonna go ahead and tell you what happened. I'm not gonna go in super detail because again, it's an episode you should probably experience yourself if you are keeping up with the series or are interested in watching the series. And then we'll give you our overall thoughts. So let's dive into the episode. All right, so the last two episodes, we've kind of been building up this heist that the group that Andor is with, that he's hired to help. They are going into an Imperial base and trying to steal the Imperial credits. So basically, where we were left off with the previous episode is that they were right outside of the Imperial base, and we were waiting to see what was going to happen. Uh, a good handful of things happen. Like they have kind of this checklist of, what to do before we actually start doing things, so to speak. One of them being the female leader puts like a transmitter on one of the towers, like on the big long bridge thing. Uh, we also have I wouldn't call it a distraction, but they did specifically pick this time period because of a certain meteor shower that's going on. And while this is happening, the Empire is also like kicking out one of the native people's groups from the land. Like they're transporting them from where they used to be, and they have like 10 stops along the way, or 10 days is how long it takes to travel the entire distance that they want these people pushed out of. And we basically see them marching, and they're being watched by the Empire very closely. Like the Empire has people stationed at different checkpoints to make sure these people are, in fact, moving out and following their orders from the Empire. Eventually, Cassian, or I should say Andor, and all of them are imitating one of these groups of Imperials. And, the people come by their stop and then they kind of fall in line to follow everybody back to the base. Let's see. One of the guys, like I didn't understand that he was part of the group already. Sarah kind of seemed like she had an intuition during the episode. But one of the main guys that we have been following with the Empire side of things is actually on the side of the group with Andor. He's kind of the inside man. He's the one that's overwatching all the people moving from, site A to site B. And basically, right now, they're leading them to the like rock formation that's right outside the base. It's kind of the sacred thing for these people to go to during these meteor showers. They have like a celebration and a dance, music, all that good stuff. So once all that stuff is starting to, go into motion, uh, we have some things from the Empire side that's kind of like the some more background knowledge. This I actually really enjoyed. We saw some of the Imperials, like their families, and how they them and their kids interact. So like it's kind of funny. One of the main officers can't get his belt to fit, and he was telling his wife that the belt won't click shut, and she's like, "Well, maybe you've grown a little bit." It's kind of funny to just see what kind of people they are in their personal lives. We get a little bit of that. We see he has a kid, um, but essentially when he goes out to meet with the natives, he speaks to them and we kind of notice that the interpreter, which is the guy that is actually with Andor's group, he actually does not translate things the way they're supposed to be. And I believe the Imperial officer kind of is like, huh? Oh no, no, it was the the native leader. He was the one that was caught off guard by how uh, what he said was in translated to the Imperial, and they exchange furs as part of their celebration. It kind of looked like Wookiee furs, but once this was done, the native people got to do their celebration, and this imperial officer that was the an actual officer, the one that was having the issue with the belt, he goes back towards the base, and Andor's group is ordered to also go to the base. Most of the Imperials are said to stay back and watch over the natives while they do their celebration, but Andor's group is told to follow this officer and head into the base. Once they actually get into the base, that's when their part of this heist mission begins. They stop the officer at gunpoint. That officer's family is there at the doors to meet him. So Cassie and all them are pointing guns at the wife and the kid. And basically, we get the sense of they have total control and they need this guy, this officer, to get into the vault because his hand will unlock the vault. So, good handful of minutes pass in the process of getting him to the vault. But eventually, they do get to the vault. He opens it up, and they basically hold all the workers at gunpoint and tell them to help load the currency onto the ship that's right there, which is the ship that they plan to use to break out of the place. So they're hurrying and trying to get this thing done. Uh, you know, Meanwhile, the celebration is still going on outside. So there's a good chunk of Imperials that are uh, distracted by the celebration. And there's a couple of them that are noticing that something is going on the inside. I believe some comm systems were going down because we see the two workers on the bridge yelling back and forth between each other. Hey, is your comm working? And we find out that they can't. And the power goes out at one point. So the Imperials are like little by little being alerted that something is going on. And so they eventually do show up at the vault and they're like, wait a minute, what's happening? And at this time, our officer that's working for Andor's group is actually helping them, move things through, get the money out. He's trying to tell them to stand down as an Imperial officer, and their intuition is telling them, no, something's going on here. And so they break out into a exchange of blaster fire amongst the groups. A good chunk of people do die. It was surprising to see some of these characters from the good guys actually die. I do believe the guy that was double crossing both sides, I believe he got shot in the process. Um, but essentially, after they get all as much money as possible onto this freighter, they try to load up and pack up and get out. Unfortunately, one person is left behind. It was the woman that was working with the woman leader. I'm sorry, I don't catch these names very often. I feel like they're not said very often either. But she's the only one that's left behind. She is in an officer's outfit, and also all the people that saw her do those things were killed in the crossfire. So there's a good chance that she may be getting off pretty easy, staying there and being able to be kind of incognito.
She
But
didn't look super worried either, so that might have been part of the plan that we just didn't know.
could be to maybe watch over what's happening. But our group blasts off with a ship. Something really cool happens here. The Empire is getting their TIE fighters out to go and chase after them. They only send three, which is kind of odd, but basically the idea is if Andor and all them can get up into the meteor shower going on, that maybe that would provide them the cover they need to avoid the Imperials, in which it ends up being the case because the meteorites hit the TIE fighters and blow them up. And Andor and them are able to get away. But one key thing while they're trying to get away, when Andor goes to like gun it and make the engines roar and make them go really, really fast, is one of the shipments is sliding back into the hull or the cargo bay, I should say. And one of the uh, members of the group is kind of like laying on the ground and it gets crushed by the big thing of currency. He doesn't die, but he does get crushed. They kind of call him the child or the kid of the group because he's so young. But they pull him out, and the woman leader like stabs him with some sort of EpiPen looking thing to give him more health. Um, he kind of stabilizes and they head towards a doctor. Like she or the group is aware of a medical doctor nearby, so they take him to this doctor. And we're almost done with the episode. We're pretty close, but there's another pretty big thing that happens here. The the guy that got crushed is being worked on by a doctor, which this doctor is pretty cool. He kind of reminded me of Maz at first, but then he had four arms, so that was pretty cool. Yeah, he's got the wicked glasses going on, probably to be able to see better what he's doing. But Andor and the guy that put the knife up to Andor's neck in a previous episode, the one that's kind of questioning Andor's motives, so to speak. They're outside talking to one another, and essentially he starts to open up to Andor about, hey, why don't we just take this money for ourselves and ditch the group? And Andor he's given him a couple of chances of like clarifying what he's saying, and the guy just keeps reiterating, yeah, you and I, we can leave. We stole 80 million. It'll cost 40 million for me to keep my mouth shut, and you can keep the other 40, essentially splitting the money. And this makes Andor feel very uncomfortable, and he ends up shooting him right away. Um, so this guy gets killed. Andor goes into the doctor's office, quote unquote. It's kind of a tent. And as he walks in, we find out that the dude actually dies from his injuries. They were not able to save him. And Andor's got his gun, pointing at the doctor and um, the woman leader, and basically is saying that dude tried to double cross us, and she's like, no way, there's no way he'd ever do that. And she ends up believing him uh, pretty quickly, in my opinion. And basically, Andor says, you guys can have what you are supposed to have. I'll take the cut that I was promised and I will leave. You can have the freighter. You can have your money. I just want my cut. And he even throws the crystal that Luthen gave him a while back as like the quote unquote down payment or collateral, so to speak. He gives that back to her, and she actually has a little bit of a trust with him and tells him that there is a manifesto that the guy that just died wanted Andor to have. Andor kind of refuses at first because he doesn't want anything to do with this group, uh, but he ends up having a little bit of a change of heart and takes it back. I can't remember. Did she give him back the crystal?
I don't think so.
I didn't think so either. I could be wrong on that, but that's the only one that I don't quite remember. Um, two more very quick things happen in this episode because that's kind of the end of what happened with Andor. One is we see Mon Mothma probably maybe 2 or 3 minutes worth, and this is really interesting. She's in the Senate, and I have thought they cheaped out by not having many people in the crowd, but that was the point, is that there wasn't very many people in the Senate listening to what she had to say. She was trying to talk to the masses, and the camera was specifically pointing out that there are people here, but they're not listening to her and they don't care because not only are they chit-chatting amongst themselves, but they're also getting up and leaving while Mon Mothma's speaking. So we kind of get this idea that, even though she's trying to start this rebellion, she actually is not very well respected, unfortunately. So we get that little snippet of her, and then the last little snippet is just of Luthen hearing that, something happened on the planet being the one that Andor and all them did the heist on. And he hears that something occurred, which triggers in his brain, oh, that's the secret mission that I was a part of, and they were able to do it. So Luthen goes in the back because the guy that told him about what happened asked Luthen if he had any artifacts from that planet, and he said, I don't know, maybe there's some in the back. And so he goes in the back and then just smiles to himself. He's really happy that clearly the mission happened. So that's about it from the episode. Uh, I think I did more of a deep dive than I thought I was going to do, but I do recommend watching the episode as well. I think as far as, what I was hoping out of it, I got. But Sarah, what did you think about the episode?
I think it was okay. I feel like it was better than what we've seen so far in terms of maybe the last one or two episodes. I still feel like episode three kind of trumps this one a little bit, in terms of like excitement or action. So some of the things that I did like was the native group. Their costumes were awesome, I thought. Just the color schemes, it was lots of reds and yellows and oranges, lots of fall colors, which they're kind of, it doesn't really match the island or the area that they're in. Um, so I just thought that was kind of neat to see those, vibrant colors. They all got their walking sticks. They all have lots of feathers, and you can hear as they walk little ching chings on their like beads knocking against each other on their walking sticks and stuff. So I thought that the design of that group was done really well. There was a lot of thought put into that. I thought that was cool.
I think that's
Uh,
interesting that you pointed out those colors specifically because I'm pretty sure those are colors that the logo or emblem of the rebellion has had. Is it's had a couple of different colors and different shades, and the ones that you mentioned definitely have been part of it.
nice. I did not know that. Um, I think it was good that the mission was successful, but not 100%, meaning that we lost some members. When something is too good to be true, often it is. So for it to be a mission done completely perfect, even though it's their very first mission as this group, I feel like that would be um, uh, not a false promise, but just not very realistic. So the fact that there were some casualties, I feel like that's to be expected, and that was a good way to incorporate some maybe not so good compared to the success of the actual mission. So I thought that was pretty well balanced. Um, Things that I didn't like is going to be, I think the biggest distractor for me is we've been building for this mission for at least two episodes, if not longer, right? But like the last two have really just been kind of, training and travel. We already have our group, Andor's already been established this group. Let's do the mission already. Like we thought the mission might have been last week and instead it was this week. So you have all this buildup already. You already have this like tension and we're ready to go, and it's still so slow to get there. And I get that part of that is just the realisticness of it's a long ways to walk, it's a long ways to swim, it's gonna take some time. But at the same time, when they're actually in the heat of the moment, they keep doing different cuts to the celebration, which the first shot I thought, oh, that's pretty cool. They're singing their songs and it's in their language, so you don't know what they're actually saying. But they're dancing and they got the meteor shower in the background. It's a really cool shot. But then, like, it felt like every 2 minutes or every however often during this very tense and exciting scene, we go back to the group dancing and just having a good time and chilling. And it was so repetitive to the point of I felt like I was watching the same clip of them dancing on a loop. Like three, four, five different times we saw the same clip. At least that's what it looked like. And maybe that's because you can't understand what they're saying, or maybe it's just because I'm like, why'd you pull me from that mission? Like we were in the heat of the moment and now I'm being let down. And then we're in the heat of the moment and then we're being let down. And it felt overdone. in my opinion. We took so long to get to this point, and now we're here and we're ready and we're excited, and then we keep going up and down and up and down. Did you get that vibe at all from that?
I did not. Um, for me, I felt like their celebration music was, I don't know if I'd say intense, but it was moving enough to at least replicate some urgency. And so um, they were part of the heist. They may not know that they were, but they were because they were distracting Imperials with the meteor shower going on. And they also had to, well, the Empire wanted their people to watch them. So in in it of itself, they were a distraction. So I almost feel like because we were learning throughout the heist that more and more Imperials were becoming more aware of what was happening. And I think by cutting back to that every now and then, they were showing like, these guys still don't know. These guys don't know. Um, so it didn't bother me as much as it was happening. I thought it was quick enough where uh it didn't linger too long. So I don't know, it didn't bother me.
What were some of your other thoughts about the episode just as a whole?
Uh so a couple of things happened like in my thoughts and how I felt throughout the episode that I didn't think I'd have. Um One of the things I thought was cool was seeing the Imperial families. I was talking in a previous episode that, a couple of things I want to see is, dive more into the Empire. What are the, nitty gritties? This is kind of that showing, the almost the human side of the Imperials. I also wanted to see stuff with the Senate, which I got to see the Senate. It wasn't very full, but I got to see the Senate. Um, and one of the things that really struck me and it really made me question kind of how to interpret the rebellion because it's not a I don't know what to say. It it's very apparent that Sarah and I we like the Empire. Tony has called us out on it on the channel a couple of times, and uh, watching this episode, when Andor's group rushes into the base and puts that officer at gunpoint, they put the mother and the kid at gunpoint too, and the wife is crying, the kid is really scared, and I don't think the wife and the well, I guess we didn't see how the wife and the kid feel about the natives, so to speak. But it kind of struck a chord with me of like the rebellion is willing to do whatever it takes, to get what they want, even if it means making children cry. So I was like, am I really watching the rebellion right now? Because it seemed like the heroes of the episode was the Empire at certain points. Definitely not during the points of, moving the natives and watching them, so to speak. That was them, being the bad guys. But when the heist was happening, there was different parts where I was like, are we sure that this is the good guys? This is how we want to paint them, so to speak. So I thought it was very interesting to see that happen with the rebellion. It, like I said, it kind of shows that they're willing to do anything. Um,
I feel like a major reason for that would be this is, very early on in the rebellion. The rebellion is not even like a well-known thing yet. So that means there's not a whole lot of leadership or guidance on what their principles are going to be as a group. So at this point, it's kind of just a free for all, however you want to get the mission done.
Yeah, and I think that kind of also plays into some of the things that I'm noticing about Mon Mothma's character. Like, when we had the previous episode with the dinner scene, well, after dinner scene, I should say, and we learned about she's kind of a control freak, and, what she says goes. And seeing that from that episode and then going to this episode where when she's in the Senate, nobody cares about what she has to say, it makes me wonder, what is that going to trigger in her brain to do? How is she going to, get people either to rally around her or, is she going to do things that are even darker? It made me wonder, like, is there much difference between this woman and the emperor at this point? Just because, they both have their own motives of trying to um, carry out their political beliefs, and they're both willing to kill people for it. So I don't know. I thought it was kind of an eye-opening episode from different points of views, not necessarily the things that they want you to focus on, like the heist, but there's these little itty bitty things I think that are sprinkled throughout that it's like, oh man, I mean, that's what I wanted to see. So I'm glad I got it in this episode.
For sure.
There was one other thing I forgot I was going to say. It was in reference to something you had said. But yeah, overall, this episode I think was definitely the best so far. Um, I feel like the two episodes before it maybe could have been shrunken down a little bit to kind of get to the point a little quicker. Um, I feel like everything in this episode had a purpose. It was cool, to see the TIE fighter pilots. Like, it wasn't just us seeing TIE fighters leave a hangar and go after. It actually humanized these people a little bit by watching them, you know, run across the catwalk, hopping into the TIE fighter, booting up the systems. Like, it's kind of like what we would see normally from the good guys, all the different bells and whistles that they do before they go into battle. But we actually get to see it from the Empire's point of view this time. I think it's pretty rare on film to be seeing that. I know one of their video games, Star Wars Squadrons, you get to go through that whole sequence, but I think as far as film, that's kind of new. So I enjoyed seeing that as well. I feel like they, in a way, gave us quite a bit of Imperial information uh, that we haven't seen in the past. So I really liked it.
You make a good point. I had kind of forgotten about those two things when I was talking about parts of the episode that I did like, being seeing the Imperial family and just kind of, it's not just uh adult leaders and stormtroopers who are also adults. There's, like wives and husbands and kids and stuff. There's families. It's not just these soulless people, so to speak. And then the scene where they're getting the TIE fighters ready, that was pretty cool to see too.
Well, let's not forget. I mean, we saw in Rogue One that, there was somebody that once was an Imperial. They didn't really do much anymore. I'm referring to Galen Erso. In the very beginning, we see his wife and we see that they had a kid being Jin. And, that was probably a little bit of taste that we got to see before this came out, but that was kind of behind the idea that, he's already moved on from the Empire. He used to be a part of it, but this family that we got to see was actually, in the nitty gritty of being a part of the Empire. I wish we would have heard a little bit more from the wife and the kid, maybe about their perspective on, the natives, just because it would kind of tell us, are they as, you know, in this as much in this evil mindset as the officer or the empire itself, or are they just kind of along for the ride and they're like, well, my dad, my husband, whoever is an imperial officer, and that's all I really know. Um, I did remember what I was going to mention. Um, you actually did not say it on film on camera yet, but when we were watching, so we watched like 10 minutes and Sarah had me pause and talk about what was going on. And one of the things that you had said was that the Imperial officers are so monotone, it was hard to understand kind of what they were saying. And
Yep.
I had thought about that for a minute, and I was like, you know, a lot of these officers are monotone. The only person that I can really remember that kind of raised his voice was the dude that Vader like minor league choked out in the conference room in episode 4. Um, when they're just talking to one another, they seem to be at that tone. So I kind of wonder if that's an Empire thing, um, not necessarily like a bad actor thing.
I think part of why I struggled with that is it wasn't a lot of times when we see these Empire scenes, it's not necessarily a conversation, it's somebody telling somebody else a piece of information or an order. So it's not a dialogue going back and forth typically. Not to say that never happens. So in this scenario at the beginning of the episode, when it was two people directly talking to one another, and they both had very similar voice tones, and on top of that were monotone speaking, I think that's where I was having kind of the issue. There wasn't enough, because you can speak monotone, with a high pitch, a low pitch, and still be monotone depending on just your vocal cords. So I don't know. Just like side note, I guess.
It kind of reminded me of like two British dudes on a Saturday morning having tea. Like, oh, this is great tea, sir. Oh, yeah, very good. Good day. Yeah, yeah. It kind of reminded me of that, how they were talking back and forth. Um, so I can kind of see, like, even if I saw a scene of two dudes acting like that, I'd probably get lost in the conversation if I wasn't paying close enough attention. So I could maybe see why there was a little bit of confusion of what they were talking about.
Are you calling me out?
No, not trying to. But I feel like if I remember correctly, when they were talking, they were cutting to um, the natives quite a bit because that's what they were talking about during that scene is basically the process of them moving from point A to point B. They also mentioned that during the trek, they started with like 500 uh, natives and they ended up with like 60. So I almost wonder if this is kind of like a Trail of Tears reference to, I think, U.S. history. That's when they made a bunch of Native Americans go from one place to another, and a lot of them actually died. Um, so I wonder if that's kind of a thing going on there.
It's not the vibe that I was getting. Um, Not to say that I'm right, but what from what I gathered, they started with 500. It's a 10-day trip. They said that the natives refused transport. They wanted to walk themselves, probably because they don't want to depend on the empire, which makes sense. So the Empire set up these camps along the way, think of like taverns and bars, just little, stations to stop at for rest, because 10 days is a long journey. And that throughout those, so many people were staying behind, not necessarily dying, I don't think, but I could be wrong. That at the end of it, they only had about 60 people left that made the full 10-day journey in 10 days and didn't take extra time stopping at all these places. So you could be right, potentially, maybe.
I feel like my assumption is based on the fact that they want these people out. Like it's not like they're having these people move to this location so that they can have their ceremony and then go back. The idea is that these people are moving from one spot to another to get out because the Empire wants to expand like on their base and whatnot. So I personally think that they would want these people gone. So if they're not moving, I thought they'd be dead.
The only thing so I guess two things. One is they did seem proud that there was only 60 left. The Empire seemed happy about that fact. That there was so many less people that were going to be there at the celebration. Maybe just because it's less people to manage, less people to watch, or maybe just because they want these people gone anyway. But I feel like if they're purposefully wanting to kill them off, they wouldn't be putting all these checkpoints. They just make them march for 10 days, which would be more Trail of Tears reminiscent to just make them go straight through without having all these like extra fancy bars and stuff for them to stop at.
Well, they weren't fancy bars. They mentioned in there that these checkpoints were crummy places.
Mm.
So I personally think they'd have checkpoints so that they know what's going on at times. Like at this checkpoint, this many people arrived, they can keep track of them. When they go from that spot to the next one, they find out, they take attendance, roll call, they find out, oh, this many people aren't here anymore, kind of a thing. But yeah, they did mention that these these taverns and places aren't they are not top notch simply because they want them to, go there to eat and drink and get out. It's not high quality stuff. That's why I don't quite believe they'd want to stay there. But um
Okay, that's
anything else?
I didn't quite pick up on that, but yeah. Um, I don't think so, other than I'm very curious where we go from here because we spent so many episodes, and I say so many, it's really only been like two or three, but it seems like a long time building up to this heist. What's going to happen next? And how is Luthen going to pull Andor back into the rebellion again? Because I feel like there's got to be something more with them.
Yeah, he seems to be what's his name? Is it Grief from Mandalorian? He's the one that kind of keeps giving Mando these jobs, so to speak. So I wonder if, like you said, Luthen's probably that kind of character in this show. Um, I'm curious to see if in any of a political role that Luthen plays, like in the Senate, or is he just, well, I guess he wouldn't show his face in that kind of a sense because he's trying to play, two different people right now. So maybe that won't happen, but just trying to see what he's going to do with Mon Mothma to try to um, push the rebellion forward. And how is she going to bring these people around to her? It is what happened kind of a setup? Was she doing that on purpose so that the Emperor, doesn't think that something's going on? Because they've mentioned a couple of times that the Empire thinks that something's up, but maybe the fact that they had people ignoring her was a setup. But if it's not, I'm curious to see how she pulls these people uh, to her side to at least listen to her when she talks, because these people were flat out ignoring her, getting their stuff together and leaving. So that's kind of what I look forward to the most. Unfortunately, I didn't say I'm curious to see what Andor does, but hopefully there's still some cool stuff moving forward. It seems like, so we talked about in the beginning when the show started that there was like time jumps and whatnot. I don't think we're gonna get time jumps, but we're definitely getting arcs. So like the first three episodes was a section, the next three episodes was a section. So I kind of wonder what's gonna happen moving forward. I will do a YouTube channel plug in here. I listened to Angry Joe show, and he had said on his or on his video about this episode that the next episode is written by one person, and then there's a chunk of three episodes that's written by a group of people, and then the last two is written by the same writers. So there's kind of this wonder if the next episode is either going to be like a one-off or a filler, or maybe it's setting up the rest of the two final arcs. It's kind of interesting to see, who's attached to what parts of the show, and then be able to try to predict what's happening. So I'm curious to see what happens in the next one. I'm kind of at that point in the show where it's like, we've been waiting so long for something really exciting to happen. This episode was up there quite a bit, in my opinion. But where do we go from here? Like, I have no guess of where they're gonna go with the show. It's kind of like a fresh new show in a way. So I'm kind of excited to see where it goes in a way. I used to be like about here. I think I'm about here now. Not quite as excited as Tony. Hopefully we'll have him on here next week as well. But um, Yeah, look forward to it. Anything else?
Not today.
Cool. Well, hopefully you guys enjoyed this Andor discussion. Once again, it was on episode 6, and this is, where the heist actually happens. I don't remember what it was called, um, but they did reference the title a couple of times in the episode. I did notice that. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to subscribe if you haven't already. Drop us a like if you liked the video, and drop us some comments letting us know your thoughts on the episode and where you think this show is going. Do you like it even more after the heist? Is it kind of what you expected? Um, did you lose all hope for some reason with this episode? Let us know. And then, as always, everybody, thank you for watching. We'll see you next time.